Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the April 22nd, 2020 meeting of the Abington Finance Committee. We are meeting once again over Zoom during the COVID-19 pandemic and stay at home, stay in place quarantine. We continue to work on the fiscal year 21 budget. We have an agenda tonight of reviewing the budget, which will include discussions with the school department, who has very kindly joined us on the call tonight. We will also discuss the latest information on the changing in the town manager position and the financial impact on that, although we will not have much information as the selectmen are meeting right now, and that's why our current town manager, Rick LaFond, is not here with us. They're meeting right now going over that specific topic, new town manager overlap and financial implications of such. We will go back over the special and annual town meeting warrant articles. We'll discuss with the DPW, the sewer main projects, and not listed on the agenda, but I did give the DPW chief a heads up. We also wanted to talk about the Center Street Bridge. Then we'll go through liaison reports, correspondence, and reviewing minutes, which again, we don't have any because we have not been doing a good job of distributing the minutes and writing them up from our most recent meetings, which we apologize for. Then we'll discuss our next meeting, which is next Wednesday, April 29th, and adjourn. So hopefully tonight will not be too long a meeting. So let's get right to it and let our valued guests have their evenings back as much as we can possibly do. So the current state of budget discussions, for the sake of those joining us or those watching at home, potentially for the first time, is that we have, as of last week, achieved a balanced budget based on all of the information that we had been working on since the fourth quarter of last year of 2019. We have spent a lot of time last week and some the week before working on trying to divine what we can do given the current financial status of the world and what impact that's going to have on the town and what ways we can prepare for that so that we are in the best possible position. We have just to continue to update everybody. We have stripped down the capital requests for this year as a town. We're trying to stick to primarily public safety capital requests. There's a capital request or I don't remember if it was a capital request or a warrant item from the school for special education money to take it out of the regular budget and put it into a specific line item so that it can be there in case we need it and not have to be a burden if we don't need it, but be there as a backup, which I believe Peter and Felicia can go into a little bit more detail, but we talked about that last week as well. And then we're trying to put as much money as we possibly can into our stabilization fund, knowing that the current economic situation is going to put us into a position that is far from ideal. We talked with the town manager and town accountant last week about the two non-school new positions that are currently in the fiscal year 21 budget, and the consensus of the committee and of the town manager's office was to, for the time being, until we know any more about state aid, keep those positions in the budget, but not to fill them until we know that we actually have the money for them. A big part of having the school department here tonight was to ask them what they might be able to do with the new positions that we had planned and that we want to be able to fill for the school department for fiscal year 21. The town's hiring cycle is very different than the school's hiring cycle. The school has much stricter deadlines of having to get people in for the beginning of the school year and being able to plan out the entire school year based on numbers of teachers, numbers in classrooms, and so on and so forth. So with that, Peter and Felicia, I don't know if anyone wanted to start out.
Oh, I want to, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
I want to start by thanking you again for having us back for another session. I appreciate the chance to communicate and exchange information and collaborate. Just to, before moving forward into the positions, I think you captured it very, very well with the closing of the gap based on where we were the second week of March, which seems like a different world compared to what we're in now, obviously. And that stabilization account for special education, I think, is probably the best way to describe it as an article that hopefully gets the town's blessing, that puts money away for a rainy day for special education, unanticipated special education costs. And I can just very briefly say, and I think many of the members of the Finance Committee already know, but for some that may not, or for the community that's listening, those unanticipated costs normally come when a student can move into the district and it could cost an exorbitant amount of money to put them in a placement. And that's why it can't be anticipated, because you can't anticipate who may move into the town with those dramatic needs. This year, with the situation we're in, there's a new unfortunate twist to this. There is the likelihood, and I choose those words carefully, that we will be required to pay compensatory services to special education students that we have in seats during these 3 months of school that are remote learning. So the students are being provided work at home with their teachers, and it's all being done by the computer, I think, as you know, or some of you are even experiencing with your own kids. And there are certain students with special needs that don't have the same access, that don't, because of their challenges, need additional supports. And because we've got to educate all kids, those students who aren't getting those supports while we are technically, we're not in session in school, but we're in session for learning, those students will be entitled to compensatory services with occupational therapists, physical therapists, speech people, services like that we will have to make up for them. So that rainy day account would be putting money away for those costs or potentially other costs. So I just thought it would probably be good if I took a step back and talked about that for a moment. Do people have questions or?
So during the, hey Peter, it's Greg. During the regular school year, so they have access to these people, and because now it's at home, they don't have access to them. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
And then those people couldn't do what we're doing here with them, or is that somewhat of the disability, like a non-computer or something?
It's because they may need speech services that require being present with a professional.
Yep.
To provide those services. Just
so something,
you know, as one example.
Or something larger than what we're doing.
Correct.
Yeah. Thanks.
This is really what we're doing right now, is one size fits all, and they're not all the same size.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So
Does anyone have other questions on that portion?
No, I do have to say my concern about not filling these positions is that with the coronavirus, we don't know if it's going to peak again in the fall and winter. And you know, for those of us that have students in the school system now, as we discussed in March, those classrooms are already crowded, and with social distancing and the younger ones who don't know how to cover their cough properly, we're really putting our teachers and our students and our children of the community at risk, especially since we don't know. So I think that if we can support the school getting those positions and them filled sooner than later, it's really a health risk as much as it is a way that we can support the schools within our community. And I just feel like it's really important to note. I know we're all living this as a day to day, but being on the front lines and living and breathing it, you know, it just really is a cause for concern to send any child, never mind a kindergartner or first grader, into a classroom with 30 kids and not be able to give them those safety precautions of desks 6 feet apart. So I think that that's important as this pandemic winds down and we don't know what's going to happen for the future of it. Thank you.
So first note, Katie, thank you for the work that you are doing outside of the
Oh,
Finance
well,
Committee.
I'm not a nurse. So I think I should be
Second,
supporting.
yeah, but you are providing a lot of support. Second of all, hopefully breathing it was a metaphor, not literal. But the other thing that I wanted to know and that we did discuss in great detail last week was it was very much the position of this committee that we want to, if at all possible, fill all of those positions for the school department. It's very much where we stood when we met with you, where we were looking at the available funds, the Student Opportunity Act, the money coming in. We thought was a great opportunity for the school department to provide more services and to do more work with the children of Abington. It's very much our hope that the money continues to be there. It's our responsibility, on the other hand, to try to, as best we can, prepare for if the money is not there.
So I could share what we've been hearing from our sources. There's a hope with our state leadership that at the federal level, there will be some relief from the federal government that'll go directly to states. There is already some, but that's going to be divided up amongst the 300 some odd communities in Massachusetts. And I don't think to date, there's a lot that's going to help many municipalities there. But there's hope that there might be more. There's also, what is the state going to do with their local aid? And your guess with that is as good as mine. We know it's not going to go up. And we can hold, and we want to hold, and we want to be responsible because as much as I'll advocate for these positions, if there aren't the dollars there to pay for them, then we've created an operational cliff or deficit that can't be sustained anyway. So I really appreciate the support that this committee has for what we want to do, and I'm not ready to give up the ship with everybody in terms of these positions. But right now we're in the dark, and we can hold on them until we get real and solid information. And I think, and just as my own opinion is, it's responsible to do that, because if let's say we imagine the worst and we just go and cut and we begin to create an angst and a stress and a panic, and we create a vacuum where there are potentially less services for people, and we go too far with those measures because we're in the dark, that's not responsible either. And yep. So I certainly appreciate that we're in a holding pattern until we get more information, and then we can make smart decisions, because that's what you do. That's how you make the best decisions.
Yep. And what we had talked about was trying to hold as long as we could without filling new positions, because we would not want to be in a position where we would bring someone in and then either at the end of the year or worst case scenario, partway through the year, have to then lay that person back off in any position. So that's where we were coming from, bringing it to you. So I think the biggest question that I have, and I think is on the minds of a lot of the people on the committee, is how long are you guys able to hold out before making that decision?
It's a great question. I think that the wheels of government are going to have to move.
Yes.
In time for us to be able to make these decisions.
Okay.
So the longer we wait, the obviously the more negative the impact. But you know, we're okay if we had to wait till July, till the end of July. It gets more difficult after that, but not impossible. Just to answer your question directly.
Perfect, thank you. Does anyone else have questions for Peter, Felicia, or Chris, or Barbara? Barbara, sorry. Got carried away reading names.
I don't have any questions though, but thanks.
I do typically expect Barbara to have questions, so.
One of the things, depending on, you know, where we have to go and potentials are, that we would have to cut other things to add a couple of the things on this list, because they're things that we just have to have in order to function. And I hope that day doesn't come. We've lived through that before. Mm-hmm. You know that we've had dramatic increases in our student population. That's good news. And so I'm hopeful that when the state comes through with some of this Chapter 70 money, especially with this Student Opportunity Act money, which has been codified into law and the legislature will be reviewing, even if they pull back on some of this money, we are still in a good position with the money for schools that they've committed to schools in Massachusetts, just because of the increases in numbers that we have had. To provide us that assistance, and that's why that money's coming to us. So, I mean, those are all hopes; those aren't definites, and that's just my listening to the news and the people that that are in our different associations. But that should help us to some degree.
Good. One of the other questions that I had was, with the 8 positions that we've been talking about, does the time frame differ by position, or is it similar with all of them? Because I know that some of them are more classroom based than others, and wasn't sure if some needed more advanced planning time, or others could be done like either right up to the beginning of the year, during the year, etc.
They are each have a different amount of time sensitivity to them, but they all fall in a different priority order. And so it's probably healthier for us to go by bang for our buck for kids.
Yep.
Than difficulty than difficulty with scheduling. It certainly is a factor. But that's the order that we'd want to go in terms of, you know, where we've had those big student population growths. That's where we'd want to put those students first. And like I said, that's why Abington, I think when Felicia and I met with you guys, that's why we got so much money for education from the state, because of those students. And then we wrote that plan that we submitted to you to address those high numbers. So we'd have to either we would, if the numbers change, we'd have to rewrite that plan, or when the numbers change, either way we'd have to rewrite that plan. But that plan would really still be that same priority order. It would just drop probably items from the end of that list if we redid that plan.
I do have a question.
Go ahead, Barbara.
I'm just wondering, I know you don't have a crystal ball, Peter, but I'm just wondering, with the larger number of kids attending the school, when we do go back to actual in-class learning, how do you think that's going to look with the number of kids in classes and the number of teachers and being able to have the space required? Is that going to put us in a position of needing more staffing or staggering things, or how's that going to work?
And you're asking a question that a lot of people have already tried to start thinking about. It's because it's a good question. And one
Even
of the problems,
space-wise,
sorry,
even space-wise throughout the building, you have the space to accommodate what some of the new policies may need to be.
and one of the problems that we're having with trying to, one of the things the state thought about before moving to this remote learning model was, if we were to loosen restrictions in the last couple of weeks of this school year, what would that look like? Would we be taking the temperature of children before they got on school buses and before they came into buildings? Would we be having a session for the part of the alphabet one week and the other part of the alphabet another week, and they'd swap and they do remote learning back and forth? None of these scenarios are known for what we'll be facing in the coming months. We don't know what the social distancing will be. I guess I'm sort of bailing out on answering the question because I just don't know until we all know exactly what our requirements are going to be at that time in terms of what's going on the ground. I know that those are a couple of the different things that people have talked about in public schools, because we would be faced with the same challenges as other communities with the return and across the state, across the nation.
Right.
Any other questions? Actually, I did have one more question, and it's not related to this. I think it's related to capital. One of the items that was on the capital plan was painting the Frollo.
Yes.
What is the need there, and what is the urgency of the need?
So I would not call it an urgent request. It's moreover, we've got a number of buildings, and the Frollo has it's safe because it's encapsulated, it's started to chip. It's a lead paint, so it requires the remediation when it's being painted. And we felt as responsible stewards of the buildings that you do one building 1 year, and then another couple of years you do another building, and that way you keep up. So we're just trying to be responsible. I think that would be something we could certainly hold off on.
Okay, good to know.
Appreciate the question. The Woodsdale roof is another one, that's sort of lingering out there, and we'll get by.
Okay, good to know. Thank you. Does anyone have other questions? All right. Peter, Felicia, Chris, thank you very much for your time. And hopefully we'll find out good news from the state soon, and we won't have to change any of the plans that we have, because I think the plans that we have put us in a very good position moving forward. So hopefully that's what we'll hear, but we shall see. And good luck with all of the work that you're doing to do remote learning through the end of this year.
Thank you. And if anybody has questions that you think of later, please, you know how to find us, and I appreciate the chance to answer them. Thank you, and everybody stay healthy and safe.
Thank you.
Thanks,
too.
Peter. You too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
All right, moving on. We have our DPW chief, John Stone, also here with us. John, we had a couple of questions for you. I think the first one was about the sewer main replacement. When you came in, and talked with us. That was not something that was necessarily on the agenda, or certainly not known. Do you want to walk us through a little bit of where we're at with that? And then the other thing was the Central Street Bridge and where we're at with that, how urgent the need is there. And you're on mute. I don't know if we lost John, if John's still there. Well, while we wait for John, oh, hey, he's off of mute now.
Sorry about that, Matt.
No worries, John. How are you tonight?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Doing good. How's the department holding up in these times?
We're doing pretty good. We're actually getting a lot of stuff done that in normal years we wouldn't be able to do because we'd be working on baseball fields and getting ready for spring sports. So we're getting a lot of other stuff done that has been on our list for a while. So kind of a blessing.
That's good to hear. Taking advantage of the situation.
Yeah, taking advantage of the situation.
Making the best of it.
Yes, we are, sir.
We did get an excellent report from Greg, who came down and toured your facility and gave us rave reviews about the guys working there.
Yeah, we have a great staff. The town is very lucky to have them.
Definitely.
As far as the force main,
yep.
Funding wise, it would strictly be funded by users of the sewer system. Through maybe a slight increase in rates or a slight increase to the basic charge or a combination of both. Back in January, we had a breach of our main force main, which runs from this office right here, which is on Summer Street, all the way to Walmart. So it's a 2-mile, 16-inch ductile iron force main that's 30 years old. Life expectancy on a pipe like that differs among engineers. Some think the lifespan is 30 years, some think it's 40, and some think it's 50. Ours turns out to be 30 for numerous different reasons. That breach cost the sewer department about $220,000 because we had to hire 10 pump trucks for 36 straight hours. So I forwarded you the report from our engineers, and there are three different proposals, alternatives to the force main reconstruction, and we were thinking of going with letter A, which is the middle of the three alternatives cost-wise. You guys see that, Matt?
No.
I emailed it to you probably, I don't know, last week, Thursday or Friday of last week. The proposal.
Let me check. Hang on.
All right.
Page 6 of that memo.
Yes,
yeah,
it is.
You emailed it to us, man.
Okay.
Page 6.
I can send it back to you if you want.
Nope. I believe I've found it. Yep. Found it.
If you can go to page 6, it pretty much sums up the proposals and alternatives.
Hang on one second. I'm just setting it up so that I can share it.
Take your time, sir.
Okay. Let me.
That's it, Mike.
That's the one.
So basically, our engineers come up with 3 different alternatives to the force main rehab or replacement, whichever direction the town wanted to proceed. Our Board of Soil Commissioners, along with others, believe that alternative A would be the best course of action. And like I said before, it would be funded strictly through the users of the sewer system. We have 4,800 of them, and it would be a combination of slight rate increase or slight basic charge increase, or a combination of both. We haven't had a rate increase since 2008. So it might be, you know, we're hoping to fund it over a span of 15 years. I have to talk to Sonia, our treasurer, a little bit more about that, but we're still early in the process.
Does anyone have questions for John about this?
Yeah.
I do, yeah.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Chris.
No, I see traffic management 510,000. So this quote includes all the things necessary to get this done, including police details and everything else. Is that true?
That is correct, aside from the only thing it doesn't include, which is why I bumped up the alternative A a little bit, is paving. We would have to pave curb to curb the roads that we construct. If we're going to go with option A, we're going to have to pave the roads, and that's the only thing this technical assessment doesn't include. So that's why I bumped it up a little bit from 6.25 to 6.75, because we're going to have to do some pavement. The state may require us to do pavement because the force main crosses Route 18 and goes down Route 123 probably about a mile. So they may require us to do some paving. So that's why I bumped that up a little.
So I have a question that's similar, I guess. In looking at the police detail for alternative B, it's half the amount of time, alternative B, as opposed to A, but only a quarter of the police detail. So is there something different about the scope that requires less police detail in general for this alternative?
Yes, alternative B would be lining the existing force main. It wouldn't be open cut and replacement like alternative A, and would require less police details. But we're not certain that lining that pipe would give us more bang for our buck. We don't think that it's never been tested lining a 2-mile 16-inch ductile iron force main. It's relatively new technology. We don't totally trust it. That's why we're going with option A. The commission is, and I and others within the DPW think option A is the best.
Just a question on option C. It looks like a combination of the two.
Absolutely,
but I'm
correct.
I'm trying to figure out how you do a combination of the two.
What we do
like
is
if you're replacing it, how are you also rehabbing the old?
we'd rehab the old one for redundancy purposes, in case anything ever happened.
So the old one would stay in place, just not in
the old one
use.
is going to stay in place anyway. But option C would be lining the old one and keeping it as redundancy and a backup. But we think, myself and the Board of Soil Commissioners and others think that that's overkill, and it's just too much money.
Yeah, I was just confused as to if you were replacing it, why would you also rehab? But having it there as backup makes sense. So
we'll still have the backup.
I don't know if the option overall makes sense, especially financially. But
yeah,
I understand now. We'll put it that way.
Hey, John.
Yes, sir.
It's Greg.
Greg, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
So, obviously, it's a weird time right now. Any way that we could, like, negotiate with these guys for option A, the one you want?
Please, Greg, keep in mind this is just a rough.
All right. So this is just an estimate. This isn't like we're going to
totally rough estimate.
Got it.
The breach occurred back in January, late January is when it occurred. So that's when we got the ball rolling on this.
I got it.
So essentially, this is the estimate, having not done the negotiating yet.
Yeah, this is
The negotiating
ballpark.
that Greg's looking for.
This is ballpark, but we wanted to get the ball rolling before we had another breach. Because like I said, that last one cost us $250,000. So
Yeah.
And it won't, you won't touch the general fund. It will be paid strictly through the users of the source system.
Okay. Other questions, Chris?
Yes. This replacement, is it a normal occurrence that other towns have done, so that I know it's a rough estimate of the cost, but that we won't sort of have a hiccup in the middle where something goes wrong? Or I know you can't guarantee it, but how likely is it that this process is somewhat routine?
It'll be fine. Whitman's doing a similar project right now. Their pipe is a little bit longer, so theirs is costing more money than our proposals. And I think they're actually going with option C, whatever. But yeah, we're gonna go with some form of plastic pipe as opposed to ductile iron. 30 years ago, they didn't have the technology to put in plastic like they do now. So now we could use something like high density polyethylene or PVC, something that's going to last a life expectancy of could be 70 years. It doesn't succumb to sewer gases. It doesn't succumb to corrosive soils. So we're pretty confident in the fact that whatever option we go with will last at least 50 years.
Excellent.
And we'll have the backup ductile iron force main as a form of redundancy and backup in case something goes wrong with the other one 30 years from now. Something like that.
Barbara, we haven't heard your questions yet.
I don't have any yet. But
Does anyone else have questions on the force main? All right, Central Street Bridge.
Central Street Bridge. I created the capital plan long before this happened with the coronavirus. So
yes.
I don't advise that to be on the capital plan for FY21, maybe sometime down the line.
Okay.
Maybe FY22, FY23. It was deemed efficient by the state, but there are two worse ratings than the one the bridge got. So we're not at those two worst ratings yet. We will be there someday. I think it should be a priority in 2021 or 2022, but I don't think this should be a burden of the taxpayers at this point in time.
Appreciate that.
Nor should anything else
candor.
on my capital plan. I don't know where anything else stands with the capital plan, but everything should just go away for a while until this is over.
John, definitely appreciate that. Does anyone have questions for John on that or on anything else?
The first time I've heard somebody say that, so thank you.
Greg, thank you for coming to visit too. All of the finance committee welcome to come visit anytime.
it would be great to do a tour when this is
Absolutely.
behind us.
Yes, we have a nice office here on Summer Street, and we could we could have pizza.
We did. We kept our 6 feet away.
Yes, we did.
Nice. Well done.
We appreciate everything you're doing, John.
Thank you very
Absolutely,
much, Barbara.
John.
I appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Stay
You
safe.
too. Stay safe.
Stay safe.
All right, and we do have our town manager and town accountant
By the
who
way,
have joined.
Either of
Yes,
which are
Greg?
social distance nor have masks on, being closer to 6 feet, and don't have masks when CDC recommendations are to wear masks and be social distance. So I feel a little offended by it, but
Here,
Sorry.
we're far apart.
it's everybody's
They
choice
are-
as all adults.
They also don't have lighting.
And I'm
yes,
sorry I'm late.
mood lighting.
I just got out of a selectmen's meeting, so I've been a little late here, so.
Yep, no, we got the word that you were going to be in the selectmen meeting, and
Well, I'd love for those
understood.
guys to stop by here.
So I think the question we have now is, what updates do you have for us this week? And is there anything you can share from that selectmen meeting that is relevant to us that you can share, obviously?
A brief discussion. It was actually at the end of our meeting, but I was suggesting to them that we look to a plan on rescheduling the town meeting till the 22nd of June. And for two reasons. One, because the goal is to push it back as late into the fiscal year as we can. The second is because, well, there's three actually. The second is because the next Monday is the week of July 4th, so that could be a difficult time in terms of getting people in a room. The third is that town council is available on the 22nd and the 29th. So if we want to, in terms of Monday, so if we want to stick with a Monday date, it seems like the 22nd makes the most sense. That being said, I think we all can appreciate that that doesn't preclude a further delay. Just to have something to plan around. Everybody hear that?
Yes.
I apologize, that was cutting in and out for me, and I think it was my connection.
Okay, is there something?
So I heard planning to reschedule to late June. I heard something about town council's availability in July 4th weekend.
Right,
So,
that's pretty much,
okay.
that would, if we want to keep it on at least plan for now to be stay on a Monday night, the 22nd seems to make the most sense, understanding that it still could be delayed further depending on, the current situation.
Yep, but that at least gives us more of an opportunity than mid-May.
Right, because I think a lot of these communities who had earlier town meetings and delayed them till late May or June, they're going to be just delaying them again.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we're about as good a situation as you can in terms of, find at least scheduling tentatively another date. So, but I don't know what the availability of the membership is, but I did tell the board that I would ask you for your recommendation, and if that's the case, I do want to let town council know as early as possible so he can pencil in that date for us.
Matt,
Yes, Barbara.
sorry, what's the latest date? Do we know what the latest date is for the school department as far as their budget? Because they run on a little bit different timeline with their contracts and everything.
So based on the information that I have gotten from Rick and Sue and from Sean Riley, the town moderator, the circumstances right now, because of the pandemic and the state of emergency in the state, have changed sort of what deadlines are, because we do have the ability as a town to technically not pass a budget before June 30th. We could continue into fiscal year 21 doing essentially 1/12 of this year's budget.
And do we know, I'm just curious,
go ahead.
How that works with unions and all of that. Is that all been worked out?
I believe that was worked out within the state legislature. I think that there were continuations and things of that nature.
Okay.
We would obviously prefer to avoid that and would prefer
Oh,
to
absolutely.
pass
I just want to know when
our
are we
budget.
actually?
It's just a question of when we can actually get enough people together in the same place
Right.
safely to be able to have town meeting. The town moderator is working with the Mass Municipal Association, the Mass moderators, to try to determine what we can do. We have an issue where our quorum is 150 people, and even in June, it's probably going to be difficult to gather 150 people in the same place safely and find 150 people that are willing to gather in the same place safely.
Can we amend that?
So that's what the town moderator has been working on. There has been proposed legislation that has not gone through as of the last check-in that I had with him. The legislation had not made it. I don't think it had even made it out of committee at that point. But there are other towns. Marblehead, I believe, got a court injunction to change their quorum to lower it. So the town moderator is working on that front pretty diligently to try to change that, to make it so that we can have when we have town meeting, that we can do it in a smaller, safer, distanced manner.
I was just looking to see what our absolute, deadline is.
So I don't
even
know,
to approve 112.
Right. I don't know, and I don't know if Sue might have a better understanding of that. Putting her on the spot completely.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
So I'm just wondering, because of the different contracts and like with the school, especially because they run on a little bit different schedule than the town. I know that they're making concessions and trying to work around the dates of town meeting, but do we know what our absolute deadline is that we could vote even a 1/12 budget?
I was talking to Sean Riley about that the other day, and it said 1/12, no less than 1/12 of the budget. So it almost seems like you can do 11/12 of the budget and spend. So it's something that we really have to look into, because it seems like they wrote the legislation a little bit weirdly, incorrectly. But there's nothing that we need to do with town meeting, in my opinion, that has to happen right away, because they're allowing us to go beyond June 30th to make decisions on our budget, pending our conservativeness.
Okay, because there's some things when they said like 1/12, I'm thinking there's some things that need to be, you budget teachers for the year. You can't do a month by month,
Yeah, it's no less than 1/12, which is weird.
Okay.
You would think it would say no more than 1/12. The way it said it was more like you can go forward in time 11 months instead of just figuring it on 1 month.
Okay.
Yeah, I talked to Sean about that over the weekend. It was very strange wording, the way that they have it worded, and he's trying to get clarification on that so that we have a better understanding of, if we do have to push town meeting out past June 30th, what we need to do and what the restrictions will be and what will be allowed.
Okay.
So there's still definitely a lot that's up in the air, but there are more possibilities. So that is, in a sense, a good thing.
Okay.
And then I think the other question for either Sue or Rick was if anything came out of the selectmen's meeting in regards to compensation through the end of the fiscal year for current, new, overlap town managers.
I'm not sure where the selectmen are sitting with that.
Okay.
I know.
So nothing new that you heard tonight.
Like as we talked about last year, Rick has a contract. He's getting paid out his vacation time, and beyond that, whatever his cutoff date is, he's got 10 weeks vacation time he's getting paid for. So you're looking well into July, and there's no money in between, unless the finance committee wants to make transfers or reserve fund, which you guys only have about $20,000 left. And I don't think they're looking beyond that at this point. But with the fact that there's been question about his, when he's leaving his time frame, it's hard to say.
Okay.
Is there, I know this is somewhat like touchy, but like, is there a time frame in which these guys will make that decision? I mean, it's the 22nd of April. Rick's leaving at the end of the month, at least on paper. Do these guys, how do we?
So the original contract was that Rick was done as of April 30th, and then they signed a contract last week, I believe, or maybe the week before that they would keep him on as a consultant for 2 months.
Got it. Okay.
For that time. So
What's that, June 30th?
yes. So as you pay him to work with the new town manager to season him, so to speak, as to the aspects of the town of Abington, there needs to be some sort of financial
Plan?
Yeah, thank you, Barbara.
Yep.
Yes. To cover both his exit and
both town managers.
Correct.
So so tonight's meeting, did that stand the same, that the plan was to go forward and have Rick stay till June 30th and the new town manager to start on, do you know what the start date is?
I haven't heard officially, but from what I heard, the new town manager is starting May 4th, and Rick is starting in Carver on May 11th. But they did extend him 2 months to work on a, I guess, hourly basis to assist in the transition. So he's going to do what he can there.
Just because I like to bust rumors or check on them anyways. There was something going around that Rick was already working for the town of Carver.
Patriot Ledger article.
He didn't officially sign a contract until this afternoon, and the contract basically states that he will work for them on an as-need basis for the next 3 weeks on an hourly salary or hourly rate or salary stipend kind of thing, but they understand that he is 100% committed to Abington until he starts there on May 11th.
So he's not been working in both towns recently?
Other than if he's there on a Saturday, or they're open on Tuesday night, he was there last night. But no, he's not here and there at the same time. Every time I see him on a phone call, he's on a phone call for something for Abington.
Okay.
Thank you, Sue. What other questions do people have? Oh, Katie.
Over the next 3 weeks, will there be an expectation of adjustment to hours for the town of Abington?
For Rick?
Yeah, for Rick.
I don't know. He was in executive session earlier tonight. That's why he was not in this session earlier. So whatever they discussed earlier is beyond what I know.
I think we all just would expect that level of professionalism, that if he's expected to be in Abington for Sorry, what did you say something, Sue?
No,
Oh, okay. I thought you were saying something. You know, we came across the same situation last year where, you know, with town officials working 2 jobs and having to take time away from Abington. So we just want to make sure that if he's going to transition earlier, that if the 40 hours a week is not given to Abington, then we shouldn't be paying him the 40 hours of the salary for the expectation of 40 weeks to Abington.
which I agree, as it happened last year with me, is that he has every right to his personal time, his vacation time, and to use it as he wishes, whether it's going on vacation or working someplace else, but that's not his intent. And I don't know how much you guys know about how hard he works, and I don't want to advocate for him because it, you know, it makes it, whatever the situation may be, but the guy is here at 7 o'clock in the morning and he's here at 6:30 every night, 6:30, 7 o'clock.
We
So
appreciate it. It's apparent
We
that
do.
very, very
that's
strong feeling about Rick and his position and
Right.
advocating for it in the last 3 weeks.
something
I'm
that
sure
I-
he's
that
grateful
all
for
of you,
that.
everybody out there needs to understand is that he works above and beyond. And even more so, in the last year, has been even more noticeable since he hasn't had an assistant town manager, and he's been pushing a lot of paper doing the stuff that she was doing. So
Thank you, Sue. That answers my question.
Any other questions? All right. Do we have any liaison reports?
Matt, I don't know if you want to talk about,
Chris?
I heard, I have a friend who is somewhat in tune with the state budget process.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about that or not?
Yes, definitely. And that
So,
goes under the budget review that we were doing, so we can definitely.
This is completely unsubstantiated, but she was told, she's works for a nonprofit that is heavily funded by state money, so she's in touch with them quite often, that to expect the state budget to be cut in fiscal year 21 by about $4 billion, which is about 9% off of what the governor had submitted in January.
Good to know. Does anyone else have anything to bring up regarding the budget or any liaison reports?
I don't have anything, Matt.
Do we have? We do not have any correspondence. We do not have meeting minutes to go over. Our next meeting will be next Wednesday, April 29th. Does anyone have anything that they would like to see us discussing next meeting? I think we can go through. What was that?
I would like to try to get the selectmen in here.
Sue, or if Rick is still in the room, can we extend the invitation to the selectmen for next Wednesday to discuss the town manager funding?
Yeah, we can.
Absolutely. That'd be awesome.
I will extend that invitation to them. I'll let Rick know.
Appreciate that.
Would it make sense to talk about the new planning position? Who would need to be in on that?
What do you want to talk about with it?
Well,
Funding the position, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah, I would assume that the same situation with the schools news positions is that we're going with what we have currently for information, and that would be definitely something that we wouldn't fund if our budgets got cut for the new year. It's important to try to get our, planning and development done in town with knowing that we have the funding there, but if we don't have the funding, that's something that we don't need to place. It is a matter of fact that, going forward, you guys might be looking at having our services cut rather than adding new positions.
Yeah. I guess my concern is that even if we get the funding in fiscal year 21,
will we have it in 22 or 23?
exactly. It seems
Sorry,
like,
Sue, could you repeat that again? Having our services what?
We might have our services cut. We might be having to lay people off in the future based on what the current state of the state is. We don't know where they're going to cut us. The federal government, the state, the budgets are uncertain for every aspect of government based on what's going on with this pandemic, that in the near future, we might be looking at putting people on layoff.
And
right
so
now, we're in the position we budgeted it, we planned for it, we appropriated it. So people are still getting paid to work from home, but there may become a point where people aren't going to be getting paid to work from home, and they're going to be going on unemployment. And since we're self-unemployed, or however you want to word it, for every 2 people or 1 person you lay off, you have to lay off
you have 2 to pay for the unemployment.
So,
So with that in mind, I just want to ask again if we can have a worst case scenario budget. I know we had discussed that.
2 or 3 weeks ago, we asked for it.
right. So I don't know how to present a worst case scenario budget without knowing what the potential cuts will be.
If we did, Sue, if we did 20%, I mean, Chris had said 10%, but like 20% is pretty aggressive at this point. I think if they were to cut everything by 20%, I think it would be pretty bad. So if we could even just do a 20%, I know last week Rick had said that there were a lot of things taken out of the budget, and I get all of that. So I don't know what was in the budget, but if we could maybe just look at like a 20% down budget and have those ideas at least in front of us.
Right, but where do you cut that 20%? Like, are you cutting 20% across the board?
I wouldn't say 20% across the board, because 20% off the library is going to lose our funding.
Or 20% off your police, or 20% off your fire. That's going to lose some really major public services.
Can we look at a 15% cut to the budget, and then you guys
I
do
get
it the
it.
way that you think you need to?
There's also a point of like, maybe there needs to be a little, if it's somewhere in the realm of 20%, we're going to have to get creative, right? And that's why I said the other day.
So you're sorry, Greg, I don't need to overtalk you.
No. The fire asked for another truck, right?
Right.
So I said, hey, what are we doing with the pickup truck, right? Just because I'll give you the reason why. I've heard it doesn't do much, right? Like, meaning like it doesn't move around that much. So I thought, okay, we have something new-ish there. Can we repurpose it so at least the person that they wanted to get that truck to has a 1-year-old truck that can do everything? I mean, it's a pickup truck. I've seen it. The thing's actually really nice. But like, can we do that? Can we look at being a little bit more? I'm not saying to say you have 10 firefighters, all of a sudden you have 8 tomorrow. It's just, we might have to get more creative with certain things. And that's all I'm thinking of. I'm not specifically thinking about how to get rid of 2 people out of every 10. And I understand what you guys are saying. There's different services, the library, stuff like that. I mean, I'm assuming, again, this is going on a big assumption. I'm assuming the state wouldn't cut funding if wouldn't cut funding to us if we cut library positions because they cut our funding by 20%. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm assuming all of this is going to be a huge learning curve for everybody. And if they're going to be hard asses about it, all right, fine, I get it. I'm not saying that they won't say, look, this says this exact thing and you have to deal with it. I just think there's going to be a lot of things that come out of here that, you know, we might have to, and by the way, I'm not saying we need to cut library. I'm just trying to figure if we could get to a number that's 20% less, we might be able to just sort of piece together some things that are at least helpful going forward. And then maybe at the end of it, we don't have to cut it by 20%. Maybe we cut it by 5%.
Right,
Maybe it's not cut at all.
That pickup truck that you're talking about is one-time money. So we can cut that and we can put it in stabilization for a rainy day fund, but that's not going to cut 20% or any percent off of your actual governmental general fund budget. It's something completely separate. It's not.
That's a capital item, right?
Right, exactly. So it's not.
So that's a capital budget. What about, like, can I just throw this out there?
But the capital budget would get cut by 20% also. Like.
Right, but that's not going to go to.
You can't put that back in the governmental budget. Like, that money stays separate.
Yeah, 100%. I understand. I'm just saying somebody needs a truck. There's one right now. Let's try to take that. And then when we're sitting here in 2021, we can then say, oh, let's get that new truck for them.
I think Greg is just trying to use that as an example, and
yeah,
it's not necessarily an apples to apples example.
Can
so,
I just,
right, you have to keep
caught
up
up on
with the
that.
capital stuff, and you have to look at personnel and general expenses to run the day-to-day businesses. And if you're going to cut 20% out of that, where are you going to cut it from? Because there's no way you can cut it out of police, fire, and EMS, DPW. So now you're gonna disproportion that to your smaller departments that also need the services, but that disproportion will cut those smaller departments down to nothing.
can they, I don't know where the 20% is coming from.
That's coming from Greg.
The 10% cut in the state, if the state did cut our funding by 10%, it would only cut our budget by like 2%, because they're only 10 million of the 56 million. So you don't have to
heavily rely on our state funding, unfortunately.
Right. Well, we're relying on them, yes, but a 10% cut is only $1 million cut.
Right, but so if we look at a 10% cut from our state funding, we're also going to see a drop in excise tax, in the amount of money coming in on property taxes, because people just aren't going to be able to do it. The money's just not going to be there. We'll get it eventually. We can, chase them and go to court and do all of that, but we have to base it on what we have. And I definitely foresee some, building permits are probably going to go down. So it's not going to just be the state funding that's going to be a drop. It's going to be the income coming into the town is going to see, I'm sure,
your local receipts are going to see a big difference as well. Your building permits, your Board of Health.
That's why I'm so far. That's why I was so high, right? I'm not trying to be, a jerk. I'm saying I'm trying to get so far over it. So in 6 months, when we look at it, it shouldn't be that big of a deal, and maybe even okay. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, as in, like, hey, this actually wasn't even close to being this bad, and we can hire another person. We can whatever it ends up being.
I think Greg's point is, if we go with the extreme outset in planning, that will give us the idea of, it'll give us the sort of the checklist of what we need to do in the worst case scenario, and give us a priority list that brings us from best case scenario down to worst case scenario.
So you want to consider 20% a worst case scenario? I can give you that, scenario, but
I think that would be pretty drastic.
Where is it? Like 10, 15, 20, 30%? Tell me what you guys want me to present and I'll present it for you.
And I apologize, I had to step away for a couple of phone calls. But,
I
Okay.
personally, I went back and looked at 2009, 2010, 2011 as an example. And, some of you were here then, so you might know better. But just looking at the budget, in that period, some of the receipts, the state dropped by about $1.5 million, 2 million. Some of the other receipts, they dropped by $1 million. And the property taxes, I can't see where they dropped, but I agree that they probably will. But, put that all together, and I feel like I'd rather do a worst case that isn't, so extreme
Arbitrary.
that you just say, cut everything. I'd rather do something that is more likely the real worst case.
I feel like 10 to 15% is a little bit more close to, having lived through this and been on this committee in 2009 and 2010 and 2011. This is something that we did. We had a budget, and we also had a worst case scenario, just so that we all kind of knew this is what we're looking at, or somewhere in between. Just so that we had a plan.
if I could just chip in, couple points. Number one, I do think, obviously, there's value to the exercise. The target is part of the something I want to make sure we're clear on, because Sue and I will get you what you request. Not a question, not even a question about that. When we talk about a reduction, my concern is where does the reduction begin? Does the reduction begin from current year's local aid, or does the reduction begin at the proposed FY21 local aid? That's $1 million different starting point.
Right.
So what becomes the worst case scenario is can either be Armageddon or a serious problem we have to deal with. So I don't have the answer to that question in terms of what a potential reduction in local aid is starting from. So I think if we can kind of get some consensus on what this exercise should look like, we can deal with it as a more legitimately, than just simply an exercise.
I would like to know what personnel we would need to cut.
Mm-hmm.
If we've trimmed everything else that we can.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that our budgets in our departments, our department heads run their departments very lean. I've been here a long time and have.
The staffing here is very thin.
And they absolutely, no one's, got extra money that they're throwing around. Our department heads are very good about being cautious with their budgets. But looking to see first, I think, what the departments themselves, if you had to cut, where could you, so that we can get through for a little bit, not long term, but where can we cut? If we have to look at a worst case scenario of, say, a 10% or 15% reduction because of the current situation, and going forward and trying to figure all of this out, asking the department heads, can you give us your worst case scenario, and then kind of putting that together. Maybe even looking back at some of the things that and I'm not saying by any stretch of the imagination that anything that we had to do in 09 or 10 was ideal at all. But maybe even looking at some of those things, like how were we being as creative as possible, and how were we what were we looking at for worst case scenario at that time? And where are we at now with that?
Can I, just so that we're clear on,
Yes.
are we looking at providing some sort of template for a 10% cut or a 15% cut?
Or just a cut of what they think they don't need.
Well, no,
I feel like they need what they have.
Yeah.
But
But I think
if they,
I think what Sue just said is but I think asking them, look, if this is gonna happen, you tell us. Like I've seen that be with a way better scenario than you telling them.
oh
Right.
yeah, we don't, there's no question,
Yes.
Greg, that you're right. We don't presume to tell department heads how best to run their department. So it's a very valid point. I guess once again, we can deal with that dynamic. The question is, collectively, what do we think that the starting point is? Is it 15%? And is it from 15% from the currently proposed cherry sheet? Or is it 15% from existing local aid? That's a huge, huge question.
Yeah.
So again, we have to, I think if we collectively decide on what that exercise should look like, then we can go forward and do that. So
my opinion is 10% from the current local cherry sheet.
okay, so from the current FY20 number, not proposed FY21. Is that
Right, no, the current number, knocking 10% off of that, what do we need to do?
Mhm.
If it has to get worse, then I guess we come up with a deeper plan. This is my opinion.
No, I think that's smart. I mean, again, 20.
Yeah.
I think I told you guys this a couple weeks ago. We just did the exercise in my company where it was 50%, right? Like we got very aggressive because we didn't know what the hell was going on, and we didn't really want to be sitting there holding the stick. So, 20% is still very aggressive. And Chris is right. I mean, if there is a 10% reduction, maybe it doesn't trickle down to us and hit us so much. Again, I just think it's going to be. This could be one of those things where the state looks at each and everything that they give out these cities and towns and say, okay, we have to adjust this. We have to adjust this. We have to adjust this. Not just one or two different things. So I think a 10% I think would be a good starting point. I don't think you can really lose if we look at that.
Okay, well, again, 10% the FY20
Yes.
revenue stream.
Yes.
I think Rick, 10% of FY21 projections.
Okay, well, just be clear, that's obviously a significantly different scenario. So as long as everybody understands, Matt, you might want to articulate, Matt, exactly what you're looking for, because I've heard different things here.
So FY20 is 2 months from over. And I don't know if we're expecting to not be able to meet our already passed and already 10/12ths of the way through budget by the end of the year. I don't know if that's what we feel is in danger. I think what we're looking at right now is the FY21 budget and what we were projecting for state funds, for revenues from like the other town revenues, and looking at that being down approximately 10%. Is that what we're looking at? My question is to the committee.
So I would say looking at a 10% reduction of the budget that we're currently crafting. But obviously there's contractual obligations that you have. So that's
correct.
You can't cut there. So
without collective bargaining, yes.
And I think that's a good approach, Matt and Barbara, specifically because
Collective bargaining.
no, I'm talking about in terms of what the target is,
Correct.
because I think there's a logic that if the state is going to reduce its proposed local funding, it would be a reduction from the formula that's in place.
Right.
And is that
Correct.
that's what you're talking about?
That's what yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Okay. So looking at, again, a model of a 10% reduction from the currently constituted revenue projection.
Yes.
Right.
Okay.
And how would manage that, again, taking into consideration contractual obligations,
Yeah.
because that's
And
contracts are in
not like
one of a
contracts
3-year.
and
We're talking,
like,
I think
yeah,
she's
like,
about, not personnel contractual obligations, but obligations that are contractual for the assessors with the, assessing our town, or
the trash budget, there's
Yeah,
contracts there.
yeah, all of
that are-
our
Yeah.
set obligations. And like Greg mentioned, the library has specific obligations, and will lose its certification if we don't meet certain percentages within the budget and things like that. So it's very much a not just flat across the board 10%.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
correct, Matt. Yes.
Like the thing with the library is, like, they have to meet the standards of.
Right. You can only cut them by the same, you can't cut them by a higher proportion than the rest of
Correct.
your
Correct.
departments.
Right.
Correct.
So,
In order for them to receive a waiver, they can get a waiver, but they can only get the waiver if you don't cut them disproportionately.
correct.
Yes.
And I'm sure that that's going to stay in place going forward.
Right. But that's honestly, I think that's a big deal. We want to maintain.
Oh, yeah.
certification. I think
Yes.
I think that has to be maintained. Well, instead of coming in late tomorrow, I think we got a lot of work to do tomorrow.
You never come in late. And secondly, I want to send some kudos out to Suzanne and keeping up for the Meals on Wheels for seniors.
Oh, huge.
And she's
Absolutely.
Yes.
cooking, and she's getting people in the community, other
She's unbelievable.
Martins and other places, to donate to the community for seniors meals.
Yep.
And I've seen a lot of it on Facebook. So, as much as people can get it out there, Suzanne has been doing a good job for our seniors.
She's unbelievable. And she does it so quietly. Oh my.
Yeah. Hearing some
Mhm.
great stuff about our Council on Aging and the
Right. Thank you.
wonderful things that are going on for the seniors in our community.
Right. Well, not to get on the stump here, but we love our first responders. We love our, medical professionals, but sometimes there are people who we forget are contributing in amazing ways.
Mhm.
My speech is over, Mr. Chairman. So, okay, we have our marching orders, so,
All right. We appreciate that.
yeah.
Other comments, questions? Is everyone on the committee good with that 10% number?
Yeah. Rick knows best of what he's talking about. So I just wanted to see something. And again, it has nothing to do with the library or the police or it's just, how can
No,
we,
it's just
can we look at
preparedness.
something and play with the numbers on it and try to get to, if there is, if stuff really is bad, I'm assuming we'd rather have something in front of us right now that looks a little bit like it's not a complete punch in the gut in 8 months or whatever.
Very good.
Yep.
And if those guys from the selectmen committee, whatever, can come in, I'd love to see that. That would be awesome.
So Rick, you were out at the time that was requested, but if the
That was
invitation could be extended to the selectmen for next Wednesday, that would be
by
great.
the way, that was a deliberate choice to not participate in that, so I hope you appreciate that.
Absolutely, yes.
I will do so, yes.
Thank you, Rick.
Thanks. And Sue.
Anyone have anything else for tonight?
I'm good.
Any of the special or annual town meeting warrant articles that we went over last week that you want to revisit right now? I don't think especially with the proposed pushing out of town meeting to late June, I don't think we necessarily need to go over them again tonight. Anyone?
And just for your knowledge, in the next meeting or two, I have spoken to the board about actually setting the warrant, as they say, and
Yep.
I mean, as you know from your experience, it's essentially it's done, but there is a formality to this that they must conclude.
For the warrants?
Yes, the warrant special, every town meeting warrant is, I use the word set, it's effectively set by the Board of Selectmen. Unless it's a petition article, the Board of Selectmen actually determines what articles appear on the warrant. Now, 99% of those are, well, that's a little strong, but the overwhelming majority of those are relatively repetitive. But still, it is a legal process. The Board of Selectmen has to determine what is going to be on the warrant. So even though you have a draft of it, and that is more than likely going to be word for word the warrant, that is a process they do have to go through.
Yeah, so I think that we should go over all the, I mean, again, I don't think we have to go over them tonight, but like the fire stuff that we were gonna redo, or I forget what the choice was exactly, but does anyone remember what that one was? It was like redo something or I don't know, fire truck getting redone or something.
Oh yeah, there was a capital request to
Yes.
refurbish the,
Yeah.
the body of three
Fire
machines. Correct.
Yeah. And if you look at any real, like, people do not have to listen to me at all. You can literally just go read this.
Good, we just muted you.
Thank you.
He will not be muted.
Refurbishing something is literally a good way to, especially a large refurbishment is a good way. I shouldn't say that. It's usually not a smart financial decision.
It's usually, I'm sorry, Greg, it's usually not, you said?
Not a smart financial decision to, I'm not saying to spend some money, I'm saying to spend a good chunk.
Yeah. What's the threshold? That's a good point. What's the threshold?
But if you don't spend that money, Greg, then those pieces of equipment aren't gonna last you another 5 years, and you're gonna have to buy new equipment.
So
I agree. The problem is that right. So when this isn't me. You can look at people that have done the studies on this stuff. So if you look at the money spent on that, because it is still an older machine, it will break down in the exact same amount of time it was going to break down anyway. But that step will be fixed, and there's certain things that he wants to fix out of that. But that doesn't mean that the truck itself isn't going to operate any better. Again, don't listen to me.
It's a valid point, Greg. What is the threshold?
Right.
And I don't know what that is, and I think that's
it's definitely a tough thing.
At the point in time, I think a further conversation with the chief is helpful, but that's you don't want to spend good money after bad.
Right.
But it's a very valid point. Yes, but
some of it's safety, safety issues and liability issues due to safety issues. And
that's a good point, Barbara, because beyond simply an economic choice, there is a public safety aspect to it. However, considering the significant cost of these apparatus,
right?
If you can get another year or 2 or 3, or the chief's hoping to get 5, I mean, you have seen in replacing both the tower truck and the engine in the last few years, this is a major expense. I think a question comes up, and this isn't what your exact question, Greg, but point, but I think it speaks to it. Is that even enough money to get the lifespan?
That's what I'm saying.
I don't know the answer to that, but it's an excellent point.
That's my bigger thing, is if it's going to be 250 grand, right, or whatever. Again, I'm throwing out a number. I don't even remember what number was on there, but and it's 700 grand for a new one. That 250 over the 5 years is most likely going to turn into 350 with fixes and engine overhauls and stuff like that. That's going to happen anyway.
Greg, I don't disagree with you at all, and I think in a perfect world, we'd be looking to replace a piece of apparatus, and this is a little bit hypothetical, but you'd be looking, to replace a piece of apparatus every 2 or 3 years. Whatever that time frame is. So you don't get to
100%.
but that's.
I completely hear you, and that's why I'm saying it, because especially with interest rates so low.
I'm with you, Greg. I'm with you, but I'm.
It's good to borrow the money, at this particular point.
Hey, Greg.
Yeah.
You work for a multi-million-dollar company. Why don't you donate some apparatus?
I would love to donate the apparatus.
Sound doesn't need an airplane, though, right?
I don't know if it's going to help fighting any fires, but.
All right, yeah, sure. We're getting off topic here. So.
Sorry,
Mr. Chairman.
That's okay.
Okay.
Any other comments, questions?
No.
As we look ahead to our meeting next Wednesday, an invite being sent to the selectmen, is there anyone else we feel we need to invite?
the school's on tonight.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Are there any matters that would benefit us discussing with Sean Riley?
I had actually extended an invite to Sean Riley. He was not able to join tonight. He is looking to try to join next week.
Okay.
Good point. Yep.
Not important enough.
It was actually personal about you, Greg.
I know it. It had to be about me.
Greg's not feeling the love.
Typically asked if you were going to be there.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I can't make it.
Anyone else? Any other
So,
about that? Any motions or comments?
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
There's a motion to adjourn and a second. Is there any discussion?
Yeah, real quick. I just want to say I appreciate everybody making all of this work. I think it's really hard remotely, and I appreciate everybody
Absolutely.
working hard to make this work.
Yep, and we appreciate the work that Rick and Sue are putting in, trying to deal with all of this.
Yes. Thank you.
And
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
Kevin Tossi from Abington Cam, who's setting this up and helping us to be broadcast out so that people can actually see what we're doing and what's going on and chime in if they need to. So Kevin, thank you as well.
Thank you.
Any other comments or discussion?
No, Kevin is everywhere all the time. So thanks, Kevin.
Without any further comments, all those in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Aye.
It is unanimous. We are adjourned. Thank you very much.